In this video, I'll be teaching you photosynthesis and cellular respiration, which are ways animals and plant cells can create ATP for cellular respiration. Here's a diagram of the chloroplasts, which are found in plant cells. Through photosynthesis, plants turn light energy into chemical energy. These cells use carbon dioxide and water to create glucose, a type of sugar. There's a special organelle called the chloroplast which gives plants their green color. This green coloring allows them to absorb blue and red light. However, green light is reflected off of them, meaning plants are not as good as absorbing green light as the other lights. In this diagram, you can see when light energy hits photosystem 2, it excites an electron to a higher potential energy state. This causes water to be split, creating oxygen gas as a waste product, hydrogen atoms or photons, and an electron to replace the one that was initially hit by the sunlight. The excited electron that then flows through the electron transport chain, providing the energy to the proton pumps, which pumps hydrogen ions or protons against its concentration gradient into the dichloroid membrane. Then this electron ends up in photosystem 1, replacing the electron that was excited by light in photosystem 1. This final electron is then used to reduce NADP plus into NADPH. Going back to the proton's ATP synthase utilizes the proton motive force, which is just the force of moving protons. And the ATP synthase uses this energy to phosphorylize ADP into ATP. This is a diagram of the Calvin cycle, which is split into three parts: carbon fixation, reduction, and regeneration. In the carbon fixation step, carbon dioxide, an inorganic molecule, is turned into an organic molecule. This happens with using a 5 carbon molecule called RUBP. So three of these carbon molecules gains a carbon from carbon dioxide, creating a 6 carbon molecule, which is then split into 6 3 carbon molecules. The ATP and NADPH created earlier are now used to transform the 3 carbon molecule into a new 3 carbon molecule called G3P. A total of 6 GDP are produced in a single cycle, and one of the GDPs leaves the carbon cycle to eventually become glucose. However, you need 2 cycles of the Calvin cycle in order to create a 6 carbon molecule from 2 G3Ps. So, we- so we gotta reset up the cycle again. So with the 5 other GDPs in the regeneration steps, ATP is used to add the carbons together in order to create the original 5 carbon molecule that started this cycle off. And through all this, photosynthesis has created glucose, which would be used to produce even more ATP into the mitochondria. So here's a diagram of the mitochondria, which is the powerhouse of the cell. Both plant and animal cells has the mitochondria, so both can use cellular respiration to turn glucose into ATP. So cellular respiration is split into 4 parts: glycolysis, pyruvate oxidation, the citric acid cycle, or otherly known as the Krebs cycle, and finally the electron transport chain and ATP synthase. As you see from all the ATP generated from all these steps, that the last step is where most of the ATP synthesis occurs. So here's the equation for ATP synthesis. It uses glucose and oxygen to create ATP. Some of the energy is released as heat energy, and the rest is the ATP. As you may have noticed that the equation for photosynthesis and cellular respiration are opposites. This is because photosynthesis stores energy in glucose, while cellular respiration releases the energy from glucose. There are two types of cellular respiration: aerobic respiration, which occurs when oxygen is present, and anaerobic respiration, which occurs when oxygen is not present. The reason why aerobic respiration is so much better at producing ATP is because it utilizes the electron transport chain, which generates most of the ATP, which will cause oxygen as the final electron acceptor. Both aerobic and anaerobic respiration uses glycolysis, which breaks down the 6-carbon sugar, glucose, into 3 carbon molecules called pyruvate. This step requires 2 ATP molecules in order to happen, but the breaking of the bonds in the glucose releases energy, which then becomes 4 ATP molecules and 2 NADPH. This is where anaerobic and aerobic respiration splits off. So the two pyruvates are then oxidized into acetyl coenzyme A. A transport protein moves the pyruvate from the cytosol into the mitochondrial matrix. In the matrix, an electron is stripped away from the pyruvate to reduce NAD plus into NADPH. This removes a carbon from each pyruvate, and these carbons turn into carbon dioxide. Then, a coenzyme A is added to form acetyl coenzyme A. These acetyl coenzyme A enters the citric acid cycle. Now, in the mitochondrial matrix, the two carbon molecules then that originated from molecules of glucose are fully broken down from carbon dioxide released as a waste product. Each cycle of the citric acid cycle breaks down one acetyl coenzyme A, so 2 cycles are needed to fully oxidize glucose. So in total, one molecule of glucose produces 4 carbon dioxide molecules, 6 NADH, 2 FADH2, and 2 ATP. Finally, in the electron transport chain, which is located in the inner membrane of the mitochondria, like in the chloroplast, electrons from NADH and FADH2 are used to power the proton pumps to pump hydrogen ions from the mitochondrial matrix into the intermembrane space, which creates a hydrogen ion gradient. The electrons flow into oxygen gas, which accepts the electrons, combining with hydrogen ions to form water. Now, the ATP synthase utilizes the proton motive force in order to phosphorylize ADP into ATP. Now, going back to the anaerobic side of cellular respiration, which was back in the glycolysis step. There are two kinds which you would need to know: lactic acid and alcohol fermentation. The reason why fermentation occurs is glycolysis does not need oxygen in order to occur, so the mitochondria can still generate ATP even in the absence of oxygen. So fermentation works to oxidize NADH back into NAD+, so it can be used again in glycolysis. In lactic acid fermentation, 2-pyruvate is turned into lactate, which oxidizes NADH back into NAD+. The reason why your muscles feel tired when exercising is because you're not getting enough oxygen, so your muscles will begin to build up with lactase, which causes the sore effect. In alcoholic fermentation, the pyruvate is turned into ethanol, releasing carbon dioxide and oxidizing NADH into NAD+. So whenever you hear about alcohol distilling, it is the breaking down of glucose into ethanol and CO2 gas. From fermentation, you can still generate ATP even if you don't have oxygen. So that's why when we don't get enough oxygen, we use anaerobic respiration to just generate enough energy to get us going.